Hi, I'm Cary Sparrow. I'm the founder and CEO of WageScape.
Cary, thanks so much for making time. Join us on Ivy Podcast. Excited about the conversation that we have planned. Especially, from a VC standpoint, we invest pretty actively in HR tech space and just anything that has to do with talent.
Mhm.
It's a big problem. It's a challenge for a lot of executives all across. It has been, and it's only growing. So I'm excited about some of the insights that you could share with us. Before we do that, maybe give us a brief thumbnail version of your career prior to this.
Sure, and thanks for having me on the show. I have a bit of what a friend of mine calls a purple squirrel career. It's not something you see all the time. My academic background was in computer engineering. I was in the Navy as a submarine officer for 8 years. I got into management consulting for a very large global firm, Towers Perrin, which is now Willis Towers Watson. I
Mhm.
was a managing partner there, and then became an executive at a very large multinational here in Minneapolis called Cargill. And so have been through a number of different roles. I founded WageScape in 2015 as an opportunity to take advantage of some new approaches, some next generation approaches to help companies understand what's happening in the labor market, who's hiring, what are they hiring for, what are they paying, in a much more real time fashion and much more higher definition approach.
Mhm.
And so that's what I've been doing for the last 8 years.
Well, that's super exciting, and I would imagine that's very relevant, especially in the current world that we all live in, with organizations trying to go back into the offices, maintaining their fully virtual capacities, or in some type of a hybrid work environment. I would imagine that you see that firsthand in some of the challenges that organizations face on a daily basis when it comes to that. Tell us a little bit more about your company. What is the opportunity, the problem that you've encountered yourself that really motivated you to go out there and build that?
I had spent a number of years, both in consulting and in the corporate world, building HR and human capital capabilities, technology, process, data, organization, policies, and so forth. And while the world was advancing pretty significantly in the areas of process and technology and even organization, data was really a problem, and especially any kind of market related data. Companies use data on pay all the time, and where the data actually comes from is really not that great. It's very limited because it comes from surveys. It's old. There's a lot of training that goes into to people in order to use the data. Compensation specialists have to go through a lot of certification training to use it, and it's really cumbersome and not nearly as useful as most folks would want. And so I saw that firsthand, and I also saw that a lot of the underlying barriers to having much better market data were going away. But nobody really seemed to be jumping in on that opportunity. Anytime you've got a really big segment of the economy and there's really bad information, then you've got enormous frictions in that economy, and we see it all the time in the labor market. And so I founded this company to help take away those frictions and create efficiencies, but also lots of innovation. And that's what we're seeing. We started by being a data as a service company, so we built a data platform that collects just a massive amount of online information about jobs, hiring, and pay, and consolidates it all down into one platform that's updated every day. We track data in about 60 countries right now, but to give you an example of our scale, in the US, we track data on over 80%, it's about 85% of all new jobs being created in the country. And we track it as soon as those jobs are listed. So we see the data, and our clients see the data before the jobs are even filled. So it's, instead of having a very backwards looking approach, which is what you get from economic figures and salary survey figures, you've got a forward looking view, which is about jobs that haven't even been hired yet and what companies are expecting to pay for those. So
You
go ahead.
kind of mentioned something interesting, the innovation in that space. When it comes to technology trends and the insights, obviously the AI has been the buzzword, for the past short period of time. Share some of your personal insights and research maybe that you've done in terms of technologies and everything that you're very excited about in HR tech space.
Yeah, so we've got a lot that's going on. Like I mentioned, we started as a data as a service company, so selling data to companies that would build, services and technology applications on top of it. But when the pandemic started, we realized that the labor market was going completely out of bounds, and nobody had a way to measure what was happening. Nobody really knew what was going on with hiring or pay. All we knew was that it was going up for pay, and that we knew that hiring was um, completely out of line with historical norms. But we had the data in our at WageScape. We had the data, and so we actually extended our business model to create an application called WageScape. That's a business intelligence application that lets people see what's going on. The That has been extremely well received, and so lots of folks can now see what's going on with hiring, pay, skills, and so forth in real time. But as demand for that data continues to go up, the ways that we can deliver it are also going up, and those are really exciting. So not just a business intelligence portal is one thing, but APIs that can embed intelligence into recruiting applications, for example. So when you open a job rec, you can see immediately what the pay ranges for that job in that market are. You can see who your competitors are, who's hiring and what they're paying. So recruiters can be a lot more effective, and hiring managers can be a lot more effective in positioning their jobs to be hired, all through what we call embedded intelligence. AI and especially large language models are going to transform the way that this intelligence is accessed. So we've got prototypes coming online this month for large language models that will use natural language to provide market intelligence, and we'll do it in a way that is not just like what you see with ChatGPT right now, for example, but we'll provide data tables that you can download. We'll provide visuals that you can also, share real time or put into presentations or other documents. In addition to taking your input, however you want to phrase it, and giving you the insights that you need. The thing about the AI models like ChatGPT is they're only as good as the data that they learn from. And when it comes to market intelligence, um, you can get two types of data. You can get backwards looking data, or you can get the kind of data that we deal with, which is real time forward looking data. So, we're pretty excited about all the different ways people will be able to consume kind of that intelligence and the innovation that will be able to happen as a result of that.
Where do you see, just in general, from your point of view, from your lens, where you operate, the labor market is shifting towards to? We've been seeing some mixed data in the news, in the publications, just overall in general in different sectors. Um, from your point of view, where do you see labor market is going? Where do you see opportunity, and where do you see areas for improvement?
Yeah, I would say that, throughout last year and into the beginning of this year, there was a lot of discussion about layoffs in the area of tech. I think that based on what we're seeing with hiring demand dropped a bit in the beginning of this year, but it's still very strong by historical standards. So there's still a lot of hiring that's going on. Wages, while there's discussion with economic data that's being published about how inflation is beginning to cool off, and it looks like wage inflation might be cooling off, we're seeing exactly the opposite. We see that advertised wages are continuing to go up at unprecedented levels. To give you an idea, after, from the beginning of 2021 through the middle of 2022, advertised wages across all jobs at all levels went up on average 20% a year over that time period, and then it tapered off a little bit. But throughout this year, it's resumed that rate, so 20% per year in growth in advertised wages across all jobs, and it really varies by location and by jobs. There are parts of the country where we're seeing wage inflation that's upwards of 60%, and other parts of the country where it's actually shrinking a little bit. But on average, it's growing at unprecedented levels. That is true across industries too. So it's not specific to anyone industry. It's not leaving any industries behind. I think that the shift to remote work from the during the height of the pandemic really opened a lot of companies' eyes in terms of where they can source talent from, not just where they have locations. And we're definitely seeing a shift back to hybrid work and to in-office work in the numbers. But I think folks have just gotten a lot savvier about where they can find talent. And as wages have gone up, um, job seekers also have a lot more options available to them now.
Yeah.
And not in a good way for employers. For example, last year we were doing some work with a client that one of their clients was a machine shop operation, and they, historically had been paying entry level at about $18 an hour. $18 an hour in most communities right now is pretty much the standard for any entry level job. So if you're looking for any kind of specialized skills, you're going to have to adjust your expectations pretty notably in order to get those. And most employers are feeling that now. But we see that as poised to continue.
You've mentioned companies shifting from fully virtual remote environments. Those are trying to build some type of a hybrid setup or maybe bring the people back into the offices. Some executives struggle, some executives succeed in that space. What are some of the recommendations you have for them in order to be able to effectively, execute on the particular strategy that they had laid out? For example, if you were a fully virtual shop, but you're now trying to bring some people back into the offices, what are some of the things that you would recommend or execute if you were, and let's say an executive or HR exec at a large corporation?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of that's really kind of a knotted ball of thread to unravel in terms of all the different considerations with what kind of policies and enablement companies put in place for hybrid, remote, and office work. I will say that when I think about this question, so as an example, I founded our company to be entirely virtual back in 2015, so before remote was even a thing, and did it for two reasons. One was to avoid having to, incur facilities costs, which usually has an ROI of negative 100%. And the other is to be able to source talent from anywhere in the world. And
Mhm.
as long as you're good at coordinating and building culture virtually, that works fine. I think some companies, struggle with those things. But the first thing I would suggest is just ensure that you're looking through a relevant frame of reference. And by relevant, I mean look at what the market is doing and look at what your competitors are doing and look at what your customers are asking for, and your suppliers and other partners and what the employees are now expecting, because those expectations are all changed. There are several million companies that have formed since the pandemic started that are entirely remote right now. Those folks have cost structures that are totally different. They have resource options that are totally different than folks that operate in fixed facilities, and those are your competitors and those are your suppliers. And so if you're going to go hard on trying to bring people back in the office, recognize the limitations associated with that, not just in terms of employer preferences, but who you're going to be competing with, because there's a growing cadre of companies that are competing using a remote model, or a heavily hybrid model. And we're not talking about the positions that have to be physically next to product or next to customers, because there are a number of those positions. But we're talking about positions that are knowledge worker positions, or are can be light industrial positions that can be done anywhere, literally. So have a relevant frame of reference on this, not just a desire to reclaim certain strengths that you had experienced in the past with in-office cultures, but recognize that the world has changed and your competitors and suppliers have changed. The other thing is talent is more empowered now than ever. And so, ever probably in the history of talent, it's more empowered now than ever. Folks, have had a very strong experience with a much more adaptable approach to work. And there's a lot of benefits from a lifestyle standpoint that remote work offers, and a lot of individuals are not going to want to give those up. So we're talking about everything from wardrobe costs to commute costs to childcare costs to flexibility around childcare, and everything that's in your life. And the reviews I think are a little bit mixed on the productivity, but in general there's lots of ways to be even more productive in a remote environment.
Well, you
Hybrid
kind
is
of beat you couldn't have set me up any better for the next question that I have for you from a standpoint of maintaining or increasing the productivity of your employees, especially if you're operating in fully remote virtual environments and or some type of a hybrid setup. What are the different strategies that may have worked well for you, or maybe some of the lessons learned through that activity? Maybe share some insights from that standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot that rests on the shoulder of leadership, and a lot that has to be done from a culture standpoint. So leaders need to be present in a very different way. They need to be present, with their teams. Um, like as an example, I meet with all of my direct reports, um, 3 to 4 times individually a week, and then as a leadership team twice a week. The average length of my one-on-one meetings is 20 minutes. Very focused, so very present with the team, but very focused, not a lot of extra meetings, just, working through big agendas, very focused on things that need to be done, decisions that need to be made. And as a result, we can work very, very fast. But the other result of that is that my team gets the support they need from me. And as a CEO, I set the tone for the entire company through my own presence. Um, Culture, there are different things that have to be done in order to sustain culture. It's not to say that physical presence isn't required. um, it really can enhance culture, but it's not required as much, I don't think. And so leaders have to be very mindful of how to sustain, nurture and sustain strong connections, a strong sense of identity, corporate identity, and the best values from a culture standpoint when folks aren't necessarily present. And this is something that effective companies have already figured out. And so this is not blinding insights from somebody that's completely out of the realm. This A lot of companies have already figured out how to lean into building really strong cultures with a remote workforce.
In terms of employee development, or let me rephrase that. Some of the most effective leadership strategies that I had seen firsthand, I actually utilize myself for my teams, is at the end of the day also prioritizing and focusing on the goals and objectives of each individual employee in terms of even their personal goals outside of work environment. What are some of the ambitions? What is something that really drives them, and try to match that with the type of help you need at your organization, and see how that could actually be connected. I think that's a winning formula in any type of situation. But just in general, maybe your personal leadership strategies that really help you not only retain the top talent but motivate them to operate at the highest levels without jeopardizing the areas that would lead to some type of a burnout. Maybe
Mhm.
share some of the insights that you utilize, or maybe you've seen others in the industry succeed in that space.
Yeah, it's so first of all, it starts before even anyone's hired. And so I'm speaking from the perspective of a CEO of a very small but fast growing business. And so everyone that I bring in, the first thing I want to know is what do they want to get out of the experience of working with us, right? So um, and then how do we make sure that the role and then our styles are compatible with those objectives? So I start with the employee, and I really look at what do they want to get out of this. I know what I need out of the role, but really I need people that because we're growing, I need people that will define kind of what the role needs to deliver and build that out and run with it. So that's the kind of profile that I'm looking for. And a big part of that, finding people like that is they've got their own objectives. So what are they?
Mhm.
We make a lot of accommodations for people that have, significant responsibilities outside of work, family situations, other commitments, whatever. We're very, very flexible around those things. And as a result, we tend to build really strong loyalty with our team. And so, that means that I've always got to be mindful also of kind of the bigger picture for each of my team members. I also have to be mindful of, as we continue to grow, at what point do we need to expand, somebody's team? So build other people around them to take on, the added work that's coming on. So it's a fine line. We're entirely self funded. So I don't have a big bank that I can go to, but as we grow in revenue, I'm constantly thinking ahead at where are we going to be adding capacity, and also checking in with staff, my team members, to make sure that our strategy and our go to market and product roadmaps are not putting people in a position that they've got more work than they can handle on a sustained basis.
Last segment of every episode, I love to focus on just you personally as an individual, and also some of the the content strategy, content diet that you subscribe to yourself when it comes to consuming content, or the information that you let your mind be exposed to when it comes to staying ahead of the curve or keeping yourself informed on all the things that are going on in your industry. Share with us some of the resources or strategies that you utilize on a daily basis to keep yourself informed on that.
Sure, I have a curated news feed, so I tend not to pay a lot of attention to mass media. I've got, a variety of topics that I get, news articles pushed to me from different sources, and those range from, international news to industry news that I'm specifically interested in, new technology developments and so forth. I'm pretty voracious with podcasts. I'm a pretty avid bike rider, and so every bike ride I'm listening to podcasts, and have a number of favorites there. And then, uh, frankly, in order to open up my mind, I make sure that I've got a healthy diet of fiction and nonfiction that I'm reading as well. I generally listen to books because I can listen anywhere. I don't have to,
Yeah.
I can listen to the car. I can be doing other things while listening. So that just makes it more efficient for me to consume a lot of.
Speaking of books, do you have a favorite one? Is there a book that you always recommend to others, and why is that?
I would say, anyone who's in business. The book that really was very thought provoking to me was Bob Iger's autobiography. Before he was called back to Disney, his autobiography detailed, his career, which was a remarkable career, and the leadership challenges that he faced at each step, and also all insights on all the other leaders that he had been working with. And I just found that really, insightful. There was a lot of, very good perspectives that I found, learnings from. So I always recommend that to anyone who's in business.
Yeah, that's definitely a classic and one of my favorites as well. Kerry, I
Yeah.
can't thank you enough for your time today. It was very short and insightful conversation that I personally learned quite a bit. Looking forward to staying in touch with you and perhaps do another episode in about a year to see if everything we've discussed still makes sense, still applies. So thank you for that.
Thanks a lot for the opportunity to talk to you and your audience.